You guys are probably getting sick of seeing me standing here in front of my truck and talking to you, but let me start this out by saying what I'm going to do is show you a clip that I shot a couple of days ago, and it was the intro to part 2, which this is going to be. And I say some things in there about me being annoyed and them wanting me to do tests, and I didn't understand it as being part of the warranty. But after I thought about it for a couple of days, of course they're going to want you to either perform tests or take the sensor and the gauge out and send it back to them for them to evaluate to see what was wrong with it. So let's jump into that. But at the end of this video and me showing you everything that I've done up to this point, I'm going to come back because there were some comments on part 1 that addressed why didn't I go with some other things like Edge or Banks or something like that. And let me come back at the end and I will explain to you what Banks told me about putting a Banks I-dash gauges into it. So I'll bring you back. Of the glow shift issue. It's a couple of days later from when I had left off on part 1. What I had to do is make a couple of hauls. So I was not able to do that voltage test on that sensor unit for the oil pressure. First of all, I'm not even sure that I wanted to do that. I mean, here's my point. They warranty their product. Nowhere's in that warranty does it say that you have to do diagnostic issues or diagnostic tests on their products to adhere to that warranty. But that kind of point also stems from my issue with the glow shift to begin with. I've had issues with the glow shift, so am I going to trust it in the future, even if I do resolve this issue, knowing that I've had issues with the thing before? Other people have had issues with it. Other people have had issues with it where they've replaced the sensors a number of times and still are having issues with it. So do I want to stay with it and always have that thought in the back of my mind where is it going to be a good product? Is the reading that I'm looking at right now while I'm driving accurate, or is it erroneous? Do I have to go back to the thing of double checking it by scrolling through the menu on my truck and pulling up the oil pressure on the digital readout on the dash menu? That's what I didn't want to do to begin with. So that's my kind of my issues with it. Now, I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for a learning experience. You know, I'm going to do it and see what the voltages are to begin with, and maybe send it to them. But do I really want to keep the gauges? I'm not really sure that I trust them. I'm not really sure that I can rely on them. Again, do I have to be always double checking them to make sure what they're reading is correct? So let's start out by, I had left off kind of showing you a drive on it, and I told you that I did that pressure test. Let me show it to you, or show you how I rigged it up and show it to you in the video. And I'll show you some other clips, and then we'll get into me doing the voltage testing on it. Okay, you're looking into the engine bay where that oil sensor is mounted. That oil sensor is that black thing down there with the red, white, black wire coming out of it. What I told you I had an epiphany, what it was is that for some reason I had in my past seen something like this happen before, where you got these wild fluctuations and the gauge would go up and down. What it was caused by is unshielded wire and picking up stray voltage out of another source. Well, that black background thing there is actually the battery, the positive battery cable coming from the alternator. And I'm wondering if it isn't picking up voltage out of that and feeding it into there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and shield it. I'm not really sure how I'm going to do it yet, but let me try and shield it, and I'll bring you back after I do it and see if that made any difference in it. Okay, what I did was I took a welding glove. You see that welding glove laying on top of the oil thing? And I put it down there, and I put it between the wiring in that cable, that 12 volt power cable. And it made a difference. What happened is the gauge registered lower, but it still did it. Now, what I noticed when I came back out here, and I've disconnected the wire, I unplugged it, so you don't see those wires there now. What I noticed when I came back out here is that cable runs directly underneath the sensor. So I'm trying to think, should I go through the process of trying to get that sensor away from the cable and thus get the wiring away from that cable also? Is that what the issue is, or is there some other unknown factor here? Is it a bad sensor? Is it a bad gauge? Is it what could possibly be wrong? So it's a Sunday. I can't talk to the people at Glow Shift, I don't know. Let me decide. Do I want to go over and try and get an 1/8 inch elbow and put it in there and have that gauge looking straight up and thus be away from that cable? Let me think about this for a little bit. I'll bring you back. Okay, let me tell you what I did. I undid the clips that were holding that wire in place and moved the wire over out of the way of it. And has it made a difference? It seems like the pressure is lower than it was before, but it's still basically doing the same thing. So it can't be that stray voltage, even though the pressures do seem to be a little bit lower. Let me take you in. I'm going to videotape it, and then what I'll do is I'll compare the two of them before and after. So here we go again after that wire had been moved. As you can see, that gauge is still fluctuating, and I've got 45 pounds on 46 pounds on the digital gauge of the truck, and we're fluctuating between like 52 and 58 on this thing. so we're holding steady at between 45 and 46 on the digital gauge of the truck, and fluctuating between, let's say, 50, 58. Now let me give it a little acceleration, and as you can see, I went up to like 85. I'm up to my normal 52, 53 PSI. So basically, it can't be see now that gauge is dropped down to, well, it's fluctuating now between like 48 and 58, and I'm at 45 on the digital gauge. But let me go back up again. Up to 85, and we're at 52 on the digital. So my thought is it's got to be the sending unit on the engine, that oil pressure sending unit. See, it keeps varying. Now it's going between like 44 and 54, and I've got 44 on the digital gauge, but it shouldn't be fluctuating because I'm not getting any RPM fluctuations in the engine. So the gauge shouldn't be fluctuating because it's a mechanical pump, oil pump. It's a mechanical oil pump, and it shouldn't fluctuate. It's got to be the gauge sending unit or the gauge itself. Here's going to be one last thought, and again, it's Sunday, so one last thought on this before I give up for the weekend. What I'm going to do is call them tomorrow, which is Monday. I'll call them and see if they can come up with an idea of what it could be. I'll tell them what I did, what I have done to what I thought it was, what I have done, and see if they have any ideas on it. Maybe they've had this happen before and there's some simple solution to it. Okay, here I am over to the truck, and as discussed in the other clip, in my conversation with Nick at Glow Shift, he wanted me to put a pressure gauge on it. Now, I told him, you know, again, I explained to him that me rigging up a pressure gauge was going to cost me as much as it would to get a new sensor from him, but this is what he wanted. Now, I'm not really sure. Again, I was in the piping industry and worked with pressures for 47 years. It's going to verify the pressure, which is correct, their Glow Shift gauge, which reads extremely high, or the digital gauge that came with the truck in the dash cluster. It's not going to explain the fluctuations of the gauges or how it doesn't stay consistent with the digital gauge. But anyways, I'm going to do it, and I'll show it to you. Okay, here we are in the truck, and I put that gauge on out there. Now I've already checked it. I was going to tear it apart. I took photographs in case Glow Shift wanted them, and I will put the photos up as a pick and pick on the link, but it's at 42. I'm not really sure if you can, I can't really tell whether that's in focus, but it's at 41, 42 PSI. Let me take you out there and show you the gauge that I hooked up. here we are. And as you can see, it's at like 41, 42 pounds. So, what I'm going to do is take this back apart, put the sensor back on, hook the wire back up, and I will show you. I can't show you at the same time, but I can show you. Okay, here we are back in the truck, and the glow shift gauge is hooked up. We're at 42 psi on the dash digital gauge. And here is the glow shift gauge, and hopefully you can see that. Now, I've got to tell you, it's closer than it was before, but I'm still getting that bounce. It's going up anywhere between 37 probably and 45. No bounce on the digital gauge. No bounce was there on the regular gauge that I hooked up via tubing, or actually a hose, via a hose to the thing. No bouncing. Okay, so I'm going to take you out and give you a little brief synopsis of what I'm going to do and what has happened. I'm just turning you back on here for a second because I want to take that up again. Yeah, see, we're still going up to 80. Yeah. Let me show that to you again. We're up to 80, 85, and it's only 51 on here. Okay, so I'm back over here at the truck after you saw the clips of me checking the oil pressure via a conventional gauge onto the port that I had plugged the sensor into and the readings that I got off of it. So I had come back from my hauls and came back over here and started making some videos about this, about him you know, having to read the voltage on the plug, and I'm going to put a pick and pick of his email up there onto it saying that I should pull back the rubber grommet on this plug, exposing bare connectors. Well, there is no rubber grommet on this plug. There's this piece of rubber, but all it is a cushion type of thing to seal the connection in there. If I pull it back, I don't know if I can do it one-handed. It doesn't expose anything. There is no bare connections in there, so I really can't do what he said because the connector is not like he said it is. There is no rubber grommet on it, and there is the other half of it down there, and that is all plastic also. So I emailed him back with pictures saying, listen, there's no rubber grommet on this thing, and I'm kind of waiting back for a response to him. I told him, you know, I could probably probe these wires, but I didn't really want to expose the insulation on them wires, you know, and potentially create another problem. I mean, I could probably tape wrap them back up again, but I think I have enough issues with their sensor and the gauges and stuff like that that I don't need to compromise wires too. And, you know, have somebody say, well, you know, that's the issue now. It's not our sensor, it's not our gauge, it's because you compromise the wires. Anyways, I'm kind of on limbo again with this thing until he gets back to me. Okay, another day and back over to the oil pressure sensor for the glow shift gauges. As I had probably mentioned in another clip, he had emailed me back and asked me to run a multimeter test probe onto some of the contact points on the sensor while the engine was running at idle and also while the engine was running at load. Well, I couldn't figure out what he was talking about in getting access into the terminals, and I will show you that in a minute, and how he related it to me to begin with, and what I had to do to get access into the terminals of the probe. But the issue is right now, these are like the test probes on the multimeter, and I cannot actually physically get them into the port, the socket, let's call it, to get them in there because of other things that are in the way down there. They're just too long. The other issue is it's very close tolerances, and I can't really see in there to probe it. And again, give me, after I'm done discussing this, I'll pull the sensor connection off of it, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. But so anyways, I just emailed him and told him that, and we'll figure out where this is gonna go. You know, I told him at this point I could actually probably go out, get an elbow, put it on there, either a street elbow or a nipple and an elbow, put it on there so that the outlet is facing up, and his sensor would screw in from the top, and that way it would give me access down into the socket to be able to get the test probe and to actually be able to see it at the same time. But again, it's getting to the point where I've spent more money getting components for test equipment, first a pressure gauge, and now if I have to get another elbow so that that sensor is facing upwards, way more money than the damn sensor costs. And I got to tell you, reading some of the comments on forums from where they've had issues with this thing before, people are kind of related that they had just contacted them and they sent them a new sensor. I'm not really sure where all this testing is coming in. Nobody has mentioned that they had to test anything. So is this just me, or did other people not mention it? But anyways, just another wrinkle in the episode, the saga of the glow shift gauge. Okay, I'm back over to the truck again, another day, and I've thought about it for a couple of days. I've had to do some things, pick some stuff up for a haul that I have to make, and didn't really do anything with it yesterday, so thought about it. I figured what I would do is go over and get sorry. What I figured I'd do is go over and get an elbow and a nipple, extend that fitting out so that the sensor is facing up and I can put a probe into it. So that's what I'm going to do. Going to add that nipple elbow and put the sensor up so that I can probe it, just so that we see where glow shift goes with this. At this point in time, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do, whether I'm going to stay with these glow shift gauges even if they fix the problem, or whether I'm going to go with something else. But let's let's give them the opportunity to see what they say about it and where this is going to go. Okay, so there is the sensor after I installed a nipple and an elbow on it, the brass nipple and elbow. I got to tell you, it looks like there's a lot of room down there, but there's not a lot of room. I actually had, I have this little 6-inch pipe wrench, and I actually had to get that onto that elbow to tighten it up. I might turn it a little bit so I can see them probes better. I mean, or see the contacts again. There's that thing. Are you able to? Should be able to see that sensor down there. Again, I might have to turn it a little bit, but I'll bring you back. I'm not going to be able to film it while I'm doing it, but I'll bring you back. So I don't know whether you're going to be able to see that or it's getting blown up by the light, but I was able to get those readings off of it, even though it's really difficult to get that probe down into that little connection, and because the wires are absolutely so close together, it's hard to get the probe on the correct wire. But anyways, I was able to do it with the engine running, and there is the results. Now, ironically, while I was doing this, I got an email from GlowShift, and it was not from the guy that tech support, Nick or Nicholas. It was just a unsigned or unsigned email saying that we hadn't heard back from you, if you need tech support, stuff like that. But anyways, I responded to his inquiry, and here's what it is. The engine at idle, the voltage across black and red is 5.06. The voltage across white and black at idle is 1.42 plus minus, and I'll explain that in a minute. And the engine at load, and when I say load, what I had to do is just kind of stick a stick in there because I'm by myself, and push the throttle down. So at 1800 RPMs, the voltage across white and black is 2.49 and plus or minus. Plus or minus means that the voltage gauge was fluctuating at those parameters. At the 5.06, it was steady and dead on, but when I got to the white and black here and the white and black at load, it was fluctuating. So I don't know what those encompass. All I can tell you is apparently that the voltage is reduced through the gauge somehow. So whether it's not putting out the proper voltage, only time will tell in his response. But anyways, that's all I can do for now. I've got to go out of town on a haul for a couple of days, so even if he does get back to me, I'm not going to be able to do anything. If he's going to want the sensor back, if he's going to want the gauge, or if he's going to want the gauge and sensor back, or if he's just going to send it, I won't know until I get a response from them, but I'll let you know. Okay, in conclusion to this part, again, it's getting too long, and let's wrap it up. I told you that I'd bring you back and talk about a couple of things. Originally, I wanted to put an iBanks or iDash in here from Banks. A couple of viewers in the first segment of this GlowShift issue, gauge issue, commented that I should have used Banks. Well, I originally did want to use Banks. I went on a bunch of sites looking for Banks iDash for 2018, and most of them did not show it. I subsequently found one after I talked to Banks, but most of them did not show it. They only went up to like 2016. So the same way with Banks. So I actually emailed Banks and asked him if it would fit into, their iDash would fit into a 2018. And I told him that I was using the OB2 port and that I wanted to use an OB2 splitter. He emailed me back, or somebody from Banks emailed me back and said to contact them. Yes, they did make one for the 2018. It just wasn't, their site hadn't been updated and listed the 2018 on their site. I called him back and he started questioning me about the splitter. He says, why are you using, do you need to put it on a splitter? And I says, because I'm using the OB2 port right now for a tuner. I've deleted the truck. And the guy's attitude changed immediately. He says, our iDash won't work with a deleted truck. He says those delete programs ruin the fucking computer unit, and we can't read off of the contaminated files from the delete program. And I says, you know, I really didn't know what to say. He took me back by his total attitude, about a cocky attitude, as soon as I told him I deleted the thing. After I hung up and had a chance to think about it for a while, I'm thinking, well, you can put an engine scanner on the OB2 port with a delete program on, and it still reads the functions of it. So I'm not buying what he was telling me. So, but I need somebody to tell me that you can do it. I really like somebody to tell me that they have an iDash and they have a delete program in theirs, and maybe even had to use a splitter for the OB2 port to get it on there. The same problem with the iDash or Edge. If I went to Edge, I would still need to come up with an OB2 splitter. Now, I know a friend of mine, not on an 18, but he has a 13, and his is deleted, and he runs the Edge program off of it, and it works just fine. But again, that's it. One last thing, and I'm going to let you go. I talked about the fluctuations in the oil pressure, and I says, you know, I told you mechanical pump and stuff like that. Okay, you get fluctuations from any pump. Of course, some pumps are less prone to fluctuations, and other pumps, like a piston pump, is very prone to fluctuations, whereas a rotary style pump is not, but it still has fluctuations, small fluctuations. So there are small fluctuations in the pump. There are small fluctuations in the engine. Your engine oil pressure, again, is under pressure, but it goes through a continuous rotation where there is parts where it gets relieved at some point in the rotation of the crankshaft, where the oil pressure is going up into the crank journals and spraying the bottom of the pistons and stuff like that. So you get fluctuations in it that way also. So, but you don't get the wild fluctuations that we're seeing, or you shouldn't be. Let's put it that way. I guarantee you're not. So most gauge, well, not a standard conventional gauge like I tested the port with, those are slow in working just by the nature of how they work. Most transducers, which this sensor is a transducer, still has a snubber on it that allows the fluctuations that happen sometimes in microseconds to not be registered on the gauge. And I've got to assume that theirs does too. When I say theirs, I mean Glow Shift. If they don't, there should be. But anyways, let me let you go. So this is it for part 2. Part 3 will be coming out when I learn more from them.